It's June 15th, 1215, and today in history King John of England is forced to sign the Magna Carta limiting royal power and establishing many principles of constitutional law, including the right to trial by jury and the requirement that all people, even the king, must obey the law. Let's dive into the history books and find out why. As we open our story today, King John of England has just returned from a disastrous campaign in France where he lost all of his territory in France except for the city of Calais. And to make things worse, when he got back to England, a group of barons were waiting to greet him not with congratulations for his valiant efforts, but with demands that he sign a document that would limit his power. Now, normally when a king was presented with such demands, he would have just laughed in their faces, raised his sword and cut off their heads. But John was in a bit of a precarious position. See, the barons had a very good reason for their demands. The English people had been under the rule of John's family, the House of Plantagenet, since 1154. And in that time they had grown weary of the royal family's high taxes and general abuse of power. It hadn't helped that John's father, King Henry II, had tried to assert royal authority over the English church, leading to the famous struggle between King and Archbishop Thomas Becket, which resulted in the murder of Archbishop Becket by knights of the realm who were angry at the king's anti-clerical policies. Then there was the intergenerational struggle between the English and French royal families regarding who had the right to rule France and the Angevin Empire, which included large parts of both England and France. Under John's older brother, King Richard the Lionheart, the English managed to hold on to their territories in France, while successfully defending England from invasion by the French. But when Richard died, John took the throne and lost all of France except for the port city of Calais. To fund his disastrous campaign, John had levied heavy taxes on the English people, which caused great discontent. So when John came back to England and saw the barons waiting to greet him, he probably knew he was in trouble. After some negotiation, John agreed to meet with the barons and see what they wanted. And so on June 15th, 1215, King John met with the barons at the town of Runnymede in an area that today we call Runnymede, just outside of London. There he met with 25 barons, each of whom represented certain interests in society, and together they drew up the terms of what would become known as the Magna Carta. So let's take a look at the document. Now, the Magna Carta, which translates roughly to Great Charter, contained 63 clauses that established certain liberties and rights of the English people. Many of the clauses dealt with administrative matters, such as making it illegal to buy or sell offices within the English government. Other clauses dealt with legal matters, such as guaranteeing the right to trial by jury rather than having a judge or magistrate simply decide a person is guilt or innocence, and other clauses dealt with taxation, such as requiring the king to hold a council with his barons before levying new taxes. Perhaps the most famous clause of the Magna Carta is Clause 39, which reads, "No free man shall be seized or imprisoned or outlawed or exiled or deprived of his rights or possessions, nor will we proceed against him or send the sheriff or any other person to do any of these things to him, nor will we do it ourselves unless by the lawful judgment of his peers or by the law of the land." This clause is important because it established the principle that everyone is subject to the law, including the king. Now, while the Magna Carta is often portrayed as a document that established individual liberty, that really wasn't its purpose. In fact, the word free as it was used in the Magna Carta referred to the freedom of the English barons and the English nobility. At this time, most of the people in England were still serfs, tied to the land they worked and owing service to their lords. However, by limiting the power of the king and establishing the principle that everyone must obey the law, the Magna Carta did eventually pave the way for individual liberty. The Magna Carta was more than just a limitation on royal power, it was also a recognition of the power of the barons. In fact, by signing the Magna Carta, King John essentially made the barons a part of the English government. From that day forward, important legislation could not be passed without the consent of the barons. So how did this document that was intended to curb royal power end up being such an important part of English constitutional law? Well, after signing the Magna Carta, King John realized he had made a grave mistake. He spent the next several years trying to get out from under the terms of the agreement, going so far as to kidnap 2 of the barons and murder another. The English people were outraged and rose up in rebellion. In response, John fled to Normandy and made a counterattack into England. But before he could make much progress, he was met by a force led by the newly elected Archbishop Stephen Langton, who refused to allow John to continue his march until he agreed to recognize the authority of the Magna Carta. With that, the Magna Carta became the law of the land in England, and it remained as such for centuries. While the Magna Carta did not initially protect the rights of the common people, over time it became a foundational document for English constitutional law, limiting royal power and protecting the rights of the people. Its principles were later incorporated into the English Bill of Rights of 1689 and the United States Declaration of Independence of 1776. But what about King John? Well, he continued to rule England until his death in 1216, at which point his 9-year-old son, Henry III, took the throne. As you might imagine, the barons didn't want a repeat of their experience with King John, so they forced Henry's mother, Queen Isabella, to act as regent until Henry came of age. But Isabella soon found herself at odds with the barons, and she fled to France, leaving Henry III at the mercy of his barons. And who can blame her? After all, this was the same bunch that had forced her husband to sign the Magna Carta. Anyway, seeing the queen flee, the barons went too far and effectively deposed young Henry, placing the throne in the hands of Louis VIII of France. Now, if you want to hear the story of how Henry III reclaimed his throne and reasserted royal authority in England, well, then stay tuned.